Apollos fans, this one hurts big time. Like you know, unfortunately, the Apollos took their first loss on Saturday, losing to the Arizona Hotshots 22-17. It seemed like nothing was going right for the Apollos. Garrett Gilbert had his worst game of the season and couldn't get anything going on offense. The defense didn't get going until late in the second half, and Terrence Garvin got thrown out of the first half for throwing a punch, which didn't help the defense at all. This one hurts, no question about it. But there are positives you can take from this game, and we will get to them all here on the Take Aim Podcast, the official podcast of the Orlando Apollos, coming to you from iHeartRadio in Orlando, Florida. As always, right across from me is the Apollos team reporter, Tom Alexander. Tom, I saw you after the game. I think everybody was in a little disbelief right outside of those elevators. Just give me your initial thoughts on the game.
Yeah, I think initially, right away, there was some disbelief just because of the way the Hotshots had played the last 3 weeks. They came in on a 3-game losing streak, and the Apollos were 5-0, of course. But the Hotshots have a lot of talent. They had 2 key guys come back from long injuries during this game. Richard Mullaney, the wide receiver, who lit the Apollos up.
It was amazing to see how he just the amount of receiving yards and catches, because we thought Rashad Ross was going to come in and be that number one receiver that everybody expected him to, and we were saying last week the wide receiver depth on the Hotshots wasn't that great, but Mullaney coming in, he lit the Apollos up on defense.
Yeah, he sure did. And then Steven Johnson, at middle linebacker, came off an injury, gave the team an inspirational speech in the locker room before the game, got them fired up. And, he was a guy that they really sorely missed in talking to my colleague out in Arizona, Jose Romero. They really missed not having him in the lineup for a few weeks. So, they were at full strength, and they came in and played like it. I mean, they needed the win to save their season, really. And so they came in and got it.
So let's jump in. I want to recap the last about 30 seconds of what happened in the game. Basically the nail in the coffin. Gilbert threw the ball to Sean Price for 48 yards to get to the Hotshots' 34-yard line. Garrett Gilbert threw to Jalen Marshall for 26 yards to get to the 8-yard line with 19 seconds left. The Apollos run down the field to spike the ball with 4 seconds left. But, of course, most of you know the false start was called, and by rule that includes the 10-second runoff, which ended the game. Obviously, that's a tough way to lose for any team.
Absolutely.
But to get to that position and ultimately have a chance to win the game after the team's worst performance yet, does that give something positive to take away from this game for the Apollos?
Yeah, I think so. And I talked with Coach Spurrier earlier today, and he felt the same way. The fact that they did not play their best game but still had a chance to win at the end made him pleased with the effort, even if he wasn't pleased with the outcome. Because all he says he asks of his players is play the best you possibly can for the entirety of the game. And they certainly did that. Down the stretch, Garrett managed to make some plays. Price had that big catch when he was wide open down the sideline. Jalen made a great catch. Ultimately, it didn't go their way. But you can, it's easy to look at that one play at the end and say, oh, if they hadn't false started. But they had so many opportunities earlier in the game that they couldn't capitalize on. They had the ball at the Arizona 5 and couldn't punch it in for a score, earlier in the fourth quarter. They had a couple of other opportunities that just didn't go their way. It wasn't their night.
Oh, and like a lot of people were saying, they're like, oh, what if there was no false start, right? You spike the ball, you have 4 seconds left. Like a lot of people said, you still got to get in the end zone.
Right.
So you don't know what happens after that.
Right, and Arizona had batted down a lot of passes that night. You look at the catch rates for the Apollos wide receivers, and I mean, the DBs were just knocking stuff down all over the place. They dropped probably 3 interceptions by my count that they could have had. So there was no guarantee at all that they score on that play. Granted, they had the momentum, and I like their chances with the receivers that they have and that kind of thing, but there's no guarantee that they score even from the 8-yard line. They couldn't score from the 5 earlier in that quarter.
Now, I want to go to the Terrence Garvin situation. I know it wasn't talked about as much as, I think it should have been. Spurrier says that we're still playing stupid. So what have you heard on the Terrence Garvin situation today? And, is he going to get disciplined in any way by Coach Spurrier?
Coach didn't indicate that in the weekly news conference this morning. He did mention again that penalties have to be tightened up. He, of course, never mentions players by name, but he did mention that play. He also mentioned some of the defensive holding call and the pass interference call in the end zone. Those are things that have hurt the Apollos throughout the year. They're magnified and intensified because of the situations in which they happened this week. But it's been an issue all year, especially on defense. You look at the numbers, Garvin getting thrown out of the game early in the third quarter really hurt them.
That hurt.
The Hotshots had over 100 rushing yards after Garvin left the game. They ended with 179, so clearly they got most of their yards after Garvin was out of the game. And without him being able to stop the run in the middle of the field and have that presence there, that's bound to happen.
Now, speaking of that Apollo's defense, I saw a lot of people on Twitter after the game, and I know Twitter's the best place to read stuff. They said, the Apollo's offense is the sole reason they lost. They couldn't get anything going on offense. It was all of them. But if we take a look at the full game, and if you were watching the same game I was, the defense was giving up a lot of running yards. They were moving the ball exceptionally well on our defense.
Yeah.
And they didn't start playing well, honestly, really well, until that, back end second half, until, of course, they go down after we score a touchdown and they put a drive together for 75 yards. What is the defense going to do to regroup this week and realize, listen, we're a team effort, and we're going to have to take part of the blame, even though the offense wasn't doing what they normally do?
Well, the defense had some guys banged up. Earl Okine was out for that game. He's in the top 5 in the Alliance in sacks. Mm-hmm. They had no sacks of John Wolford. In fact, Wolford said after the game he couldn't remember getting
barely
hit
touched
at all.
Yeah.
So clearly they had some issues. Anthony Moten, who's tied with Okine in sacks, was also out. Josh Banks went down in the middle of the game, didn't come back. So they were thin up front, and then Garvin getting thrown out of the game. So the front seven was really thin. When you lose the ability to put pressure on the quarterback and you give him time, he's going to make plays. Guys are going to get open because DBs can't run with receivers forever. It's something that the Apollos used to their advantage on offense against other teams earlier this season, and they were on the negative end of that this week.
So Coach Spurrier said in his post-game presser, it was the one thing that kind of stood out because everybody's thinking about the offensive line because Garrett, many times, not just this game, but many times in this season is getting hurried, getting hit, knocked down. And he said that one guy on the offensive line is having trouble, and that causes the rest of the line to break down. I think he was referring to number 70, Eaton, but I'm not exactly sure. I think it was just the right side was getting, pressure all night. Do you think there's going to be any changes made to the O-line, or how do you think this offensive line regroups and refocuses going into Atlanta?
This is one of those games where nothing went right. The O-line had its best game of the season just a week before. No sacks. Gilbert wasn't touched much at all against Birmingham, who has a good defense. So, you take what you can from this game and you just wipe it away and move on. I think that's why Coach Spurrier seemed to be in a better mood after this game than he was after the Memphis game earlier in the season when the Apollos won.
I noticed that. In the post-game presser, everybody was kind of on, they were just, okay, we need to make sure, Spurrier's going to come in here and he's going to be a little mad.
What's he going to say?
Yeah, exactly. But he comes in and he's like, well, we're not going undefeated anymore. And he was really casual and kind of took it really well considering how bad the Apollos played.
Yeah, you have to look at it and you see how many things went wrong in almost every phase of the game on Saturday. And you have to chalk it up to an anomaly. And it's just bound to happen sooner or later. Not everyone has a great night. I have bad days at work all the time. Mm-hmm. These guys are at work. They're professionals. They're humans. They had a bad night. And so you take what you can from it and you move on. He didn't want to talk much about the game today. He's very focused on Atlanta now. The Apollos are still in the driver's seat in terms of the playoff picture. They beat Atlanta this week. They clinch a spot in the conference championship game. So it's tough to lose. It's tough to have the streak broken for everyone who was hoping for an undefeated season. But they're 5-1. They're still the best record in the league.
Yeah,
there's still a lot of things to be excited about.
And I didn't think people understood that. You've said it a couple times in a couple interviews, they win this week. They're in the postseason.
Yeah,
and people are like, okay. But I wanted to say before we go to the next game, and I think you said it to me also after the game. Fans, they were thinking, we're 5-0, undefeated, obviously the best team, hands down, nothing can go wrong, right? They lose one game and everybody's, oh my God, it's over, blah, blah, blah. Think about it this way. Would you rather have 1 to 2 losses in the regular season and then go to the conference championship, win and go to the final championship? Or would you rather go undefeated 10-0 and then get to that conference championship and lose?
Right, exactly.
And everything crumbles.
Right. Then you're 10-1, but you don't have anything to show for it.
Nobody cares that you went undefeated in the regular season.
The goal all along, Coach Spurrier has said from day one, and these players have said from day one, is to win the championship. It was not to go undefeated. That was not the goal. I think part of that is People are used to college football where one loss can sink your entire season, especially in the Orlando market. They've been a little spoiled by watching UCF be undefeated for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
The home team hasn't lost at that stadium, and it's got to be 3 years at this point. So it's tough to swallow that as a market and as fans, but you have to take a deep breath and step back and look at this and say, okay, worst we can do, we win this weekend. Worst we can do, 6-4. We're still in the conference championship game. You still got a shot to win the whole thing. And that's what you want. You want your team to have a shot to win the whole thing.
And hopefully Orlando fans will realize that, and I think they will.
They will. It just takes a while. You get over the loss. It's you mourn it for 24 hours and you move on.
And you're good. So we'll move on to the next one. We're done with that loss. Let's move on to the next one. The Orlando Apollos are playing the Atlanta Legends Saturday at 2 p.m. on TNT. It's in Atlanta. We had them for the first game of the year where it was a really good game for us and just a really bad game for them. We beat them 40-6. But this is an entirely new team.
Yeah, it
new
really
quarterback, new offensive coordinator. You got Aaron Murray sitting back there instead of Sims. They did just get beat by the San Antonio Commanders 37-6. So they will be hungry for a win. But again, we just came off of our first loss.
Yeah.
So we're going to be hungry for a win as well. How important is this game to get that confidence or morale back that we had before the loss last week?
Oh, it's vital. It's absolutely vital. If Atlanta manages to get a win this week, they're back in the playoff picture. Murray had a bad game against San Antonio. He threw 3 picks, got pulled in favor of Peter Pujols, who played okay. He didn't play much, but he got pulled. So we don't know what their quarterback situation is going to be like this weekend. It'll probably be Murray again. Mm-hmm. Ken Zampese came in week 5 and got him their first win. Basically, it seemed like everything he called worked really well. That's their 3rd offensive coordinator since training camp this year. But they're a very different team from when we saw them in week 1. Their defense is tops in the alliance in terms of total yards allowed. They're in the top half of the league. They've allowed 994 passing yards all season, less than 1,000, best in the alliance. They're in the top half of the league in stopping the run. So that is a good defense, and it's been a good defense all season. That's something to be concerned about. And the offense is better than it was the last time we saw them. So they're going to have to stick to their game plan, do what they do well. Okine is expected to come back this week on defense.
Big help.
That's a huge help. Josh Banks is expected to be ready to go this week. I haven't heard about Moten yet, but we'll see. He's got this lower leg thing that I guess can be a nagging thing for some people, so we'll see how that goes. But they're relatively healthy on offense. This O-line's going to probably come out hungry and wanting to prove themselves after having a bad game this past week. I'm sure Charles Johnson doesn't like being held to less than 50 receiving yards on the game, so he may go off. Jalen had a fantastic game in the loss. Charles was covered a lot, and Jalen managed to get 98 yards and a touchdown. So that he's finding some rhythm back again. The Apollos are. This was, I think, a reality check. When
100%.
When you're 5-0 and you're either dominating opponents or no matter what you do wrong, you still win.
You kind of feel like you're untouchable.
Exactly. And so this, everybody comes back to earth a little bit. You realize, okay, we could lose any given week. Just never know. We've got to focus. We've got to do that. And that's my speculation as somebody just sort of around the team. I haven't heard that from anyone, but I think to a degree this takes some pressure off. You just focus on now, we win the whole thing. Don't worry about the streak. The streak is over. We don't need to be perfect. We just got to win the whole thing. Take care of business.
Kind of ironic, stop worrying about the streak, UCF.
Yeah.
It's almost too ironic. You play in the same stadium. But I thought it was interesting watching the game. Charles Johnson was double and triple covered all night. So getting Jalen those reps and getting him to basically go off in that game, it can only help the Apollos because when you go into these matchups, Charles had just been going on a tear the past 3 weeks. So for him to have an off game, these teams are double covering him, and now you got Jalen Marshall on the end single coverage, and he can take advantage of those matchups.
Yeah, I mean that's the strength of this team is the depth. I think they have the deepest roster in the alliance in terms of talent. I've been saying that all year. And when you have talented guys like Renell Hall and Dante Dye and Jalen and Chris Thompson, who's had some big plays the last few games. Even the tight end core. Sean Price is a very fast, very talented pass catcher. Scott Orndorff had a big game 2 weeks ago. Matt Weiser's a very good pass catcher. Charles drawing all that attention is going to open things up for those guys, and those guys are playmakers when they get the ball in their hands. So, Garrett's got weapons besides Charles, and we saw that with Jalen this week. The team just came up a little bit short at the end.
Now, Tom, I know we've played the Legends once before.
Yeah.
But just to give a recap, who can cause problems for the Apollos this weekend?
Terrion Folston, their running back, is very good. He can cause some issues. You have Malachi Jones is a stud on that team. They're a dangerous squad if you take them lightly. Look at what happened with Arizona a few weeks ago.
Exactly. If you didn't know, I know some of the fans might not know, the Legends did beat the Hotshots. So if you're not aware, this is a team just like every other team in the Alliance that we can go on any given day and lose, but hopefully this weekend we can take advantage of that. So, Tom, it's not much fun when we lose a game to come back and play this game, but we have to keep doing, we have to keep treading on the weekly Apollos Bowl predictions game. If you didn't know, we were both horrible last week.
I would imagine so. I had a feeling.
We were both atrocious. We both got only 2 right. The one that you got right was that the Hotshots would rush for over 120. Yeah. And then I got that Rashad Ross would get more receiving yards than Charles Johnson.
Okay.
And then the one we both got right was the Garrett Gilbert would throw for over 225, and we just barely got that one.
Just barely.
So we're going to hope that this week we do a little better. You're 7-3 on the year. I'm 5-5. So let's get into it. The first one, the Apollos will score more than 30 points this weekend.
Yes.
I'll say yes. The Apollos will hold the Legends to under 13 points.
No.
I'm going to say yes.
You think it's going to be another blowout?
Well, you got to hope for that. And the thing is, the Apollos are going to come in hopefully a lot more confident that, they just took a loss, but you beat a team 40-6, and we don't know who the quarterback is going to be for, Atlanta this weekend. So I'm going to say under 13, but no, neither one of us knows. They can come in and put up 30.
I mean, they've put up huge numbers with Murray at quarterback, and
he can pass the ball.
He
passed for over 300 in the past couple games, so he can really pass the ball, and he can be an issue. The Apollos will have over or under 400 yards of total offense.
I'm going to go with over. They had almost that anyway against Arizona.
Last week. That's why I was thinking they would go over. So I'll say over. Defense will pick off, I said Aaron Murray, but I'm just going to say any quarterback at least once.
Yes.
I'll say yes.
Yeah, the defense is hungry. They had no turnovers this week.
Yeah, Keith Reeser or Terrence Garvin.
I mean, has Keith Reeser gone 2 weeks without an interception?
That's what I was thinking. I was like, oh, God, Keith is having a little off week. He's going to come back and get 2 picks or something. And then finally, the Apollos beat the Legends.
Yeah, I'm going to go with yes.
We're going to hope and say yes. Tom, as always, thank you for coming in. Let's go 1-0 and get back on track.
All right, let's do it.
And Apollos fans, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Take Aim podcast. We really appreciate it. If you have not yet subscribed to the Apollos YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? We're uploading new and fresh content for all you Apollos fans to enjoy. Also, make sure to follow the Apollos on Instagram and Twitter at AAF Apollos. Follow our team reporter, Tom Alexander, on Twitter at @TomAlexander. And follow me on Twitter at @SeanGreen__. Let's go 1-0, Apollos fans. Make sure to tune into TNT on Saturday at 2 p.m. Make sure to buy tickets to our next home game on April 6th as the playoff hunt continues against the San Diego Fleet. #TakeAim and enjoy the game on Saturday.